Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is developing school improvement plans that translate into projects for MEGS. And I just want to make sure that everyone is seeing the PowerPoint. So is that what everyone is looking at right now? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll start off with some quick introductions. This training is being put on by two groups, instructional designs and designs for learning. Basically, what we do is we support contract renewal process. We help with analyzing data. We document school successes and guiding school improvement efforts. We also provide some resources and training, and we also provide coaching and support. And as we go through the PowerPoint, we'll also highlight some additional ways that both companies are able to support the schools. So my name is Marcy Myers. Like you, I am a charter school educator. For 12 years, I worked in charter schools as a teacher, as an administrator, and I'm also a parent of a charter school kiddo. My current role right now is I work with instructional designs as a project manager. I've been with this company for almost one whole year. Coming in June, it will be I'll have my 1 year anniversary. Some of the things that I do is I facilitate training. I provide resources, but most importantly, I am a charter schools partner in helping you reach contract renewal. And I'll pass it over to Patty. She'll introduce herself.
Yep. So my name is Patty McCauley, and I also was an educator and an administrator in charter schools. I don't know how many years, quite a few. And I am working with Designs for Learning as an educational consultant, and I facilitate teacher coaching and work with schools on helping them complete their title applications. And I'm willing to kind of punt if they need me somewhere else. So I am definitely able to provide resources as well as be a resource, and definitely willing to partner with schools on needs they have.
So today's presentation will have 4 objectives. We want to help schools submit a successful title application by applying the best practices in school improvement planning. Last year was the first year of MEGS, and we learned a lot from those submissions. And so we want to apply those lessons learned to help schools complete an application. We want to help follow a manageable roadmap to meet those deadlines. And then we also want to understand how we can be a better assistance to schools in deadlines and achieving those successes. So we want to start off with talking about really what is the purpose of Title I funds, since that's really what MEGS is using. So first of all, the purpose of Title I funds is really to raise student achievement levels of students that are not meeting standards. And mostly it's to help those students or schools that have a high percentage of low-income children. There are 2 different ways that schools can access Title I funds. The first one is by being an entire school-wide Title I school. And if you are a school-wide Title I program, then you can use your funds that help the entire school. You can also use those funds to support the entire population. If you are a school that is a targeted assistance program, also called TAP, then you can only use those funds to provide services for identified students. And those funds need to be used to help students that are not meeting standards or at risk for not meeting standards. There's also certain requirements for each of those schools. So if you are a school-wide program, there are 3 things that you must be doing annually. So the first one is you must conduct a comprehensive needs assessment, as well as prepare a comprehensive school improvement plan. And you also must annually evaluate the school-wide plan. These are requirements, and these are things that the school signs that says, yes, we're doing. And it has happened where schools did not do one of these 3 things, and they did lose their status as school-wide, and they were put down to targeted assistance. So it's really essential that we're making sure that we're doing all 3 of these things. Also, school-wide funds can be used to support any activity that support any of the needs and strategies that were identified in your school-wide plan. If you're a targeted assistance program, any school that receives Title I Part A funds can have a targeted assistance program. In order for students to qualify for targeted assistance programs, they must show that they qualify by using at least 2 identified sources. So today's session is really all about just getting you started on developing your Title I school improvement plan. So first, we're going to start up with the lessons learned from year 1 of MEGS, and both IDI and Designs for Learning learned a lot as we were helping schools get their projects approved in MEGS, and we were doing a lot of back and forth. And our goal this year is to avoid doing that back and forth and getting those projects approved the first time so that you all can access your funds. So first off is answer the question and only that question. So some of the things that we noticed with some of the schools is that the question might say something like, describe your project. And they're either they didn't describe the project, or they were putting in so much information that the evaluator kind of had to look through, and they were trying to decipher and figure out what exactly the school was doing. So one of the recommendations that we make is to think about what you did when you were in the classroom and you taught students how to answer questions by using part of the question. We're recommending that same thing. So if it says describe the project, we recommend you start saying the project is, this way it will help you keep you guided and on track. Or if it says describe the rationale for this, the rationale for this project is, that will help make sure that the question or your answer is focused in answering the question. Another issue that we saw last year was that the projects that were provided were not very clear. A lot of times they included just theories and generalizations. So for example, there were some schools that were wanting to use their funds for family engagement activities, and maybe even hire a liaison. And they gave the theory about why it was important, but they didn't actually say what that person's job description would be. So we want to make sure we're avoiding the theory. So MDE already understands why these are important. They really want to know how you're going to be utilizing the funds. A third reason why a lot of the applications got returned or rejected was because the budget did not align with the program, or they didn't make it clear. So MDE does not want to have to guess what you're trying to use the money for. So when you are describing your project, it should be very clear. So if you're going to be using funds to hire a new person, it should say that in the project, that we're going to hire an extra para to do some extra work, or we're going to be hiring an interventionist. It should be really clear. If you're going to be using it for professional development, again, it should be really, really clear. What is that PD going to be? If you don't exactly know by July 1 what vendor you're going to be using for a PD or workshop that you might be providing, that's okay. You are permitted to say vendor to be determined. So you can put a TBD if you're not sure who. If you're going to be using it to purchase some additional curriculum or supplemental resources, in the project, it should say, we will be purchasing this curriculum, or we will be using it to help pay for this technology. So it should be very clear what you're using it for. Same thing too, when you're thinking about professional development. Most times when you're doing professional development, there's going to be some materials that go along with it. So either you're providing some resources to the participants, make sure you put that in the description as well. So as you're doing some professional development, we will also be providing some materials and resources during that professional development for our participants to use. Just make sure that it's really, really clear. The only one that you don't have to that you really don't have to specify is benefits. So if you're hiring a person and it's going to be paying for their salary, MDE already knows that most likely benefits, if your school offers that, will also be included as part of salary. Some other things that you want to think about as you're getting ready is your assessment calendar for next year. So as you're inputting things into MEGS, excuse me, your assessment calendar is going to be one of the requirements. Also thinking about your plan for identifying assisting homeless students. Okay, so that's also another requirement that you'll need to have ready to submit into MEGS. Um, Really, MDE, when you're looking at these, is making sure that you have a clear plan of how you're going to identify, but then also how does your plan differ for these students versus students that are not homeless? And both companies can help with this as well. If you don't have one, we can help with developing that. And the same thing too, having a plan ready for transitioning students. So what supports does the school have in place for students that are transitioning from pre-K to kindergarten, or from elementary school to middle school, or from middle school to high school, or from high school to either college or to career? Again, if these are plans that you don't quite have ready in place, these are something that both companies can help develop. And also creating a plan for engaging families during fiscal year 25. This is different from your policy. So you do want to make sure that that you are submitting what you are going to do for 25. So what activities, what events do you already have on the calendar for fiscal year 25 that are engaging families? And then this final one was the biggest reason that that we noticed that most applications were returned, was that the comprehensive school improvement plan was not done. So when we were working with some schools on it, getting their projects approved, we would ask them, so what kind of things have you done? Like, what do you want to use the money for? And they weren't quite sure because they hadn't done their school improvement plan. So it was really difficult to come up with projects when that plan hasn't been done. So that's really what today is going to focus on, is doing your school improvement plan so that you can have projects ready to go into MEGS by July 1. We'll go through each of these steps in detail, but really the school improvement planning process is 7 steps. And again, IDI and Designs for Learning are here to help you go through each of these steps. So the first one is gathering input from a team of people, and you want to think about including parents and staff into that. It should not just be administrators. Step 2 is conducting a comprehensive needs assessment. Step 3 will be identifying root causes. Step 4, that's when you get to have the fun part, or I think that's the fun part. It's when you get to be creative and you develop the strategies and projects that will hopefully address those root causes. Step 5 is creating that action plan, the action steps and implementing the plan. How and when will you do that? Step 6 is coming up with your plan for how you're going to monitor and evaluate the plan. And then step 7 is communicating the plan. So like I said, we're going to go through each one of those steps. So first one was step 1 is gathering input from a team of people. So the first thing you want to do is think about data you already have. Okay, so you already have your preliminary MCA data. So you're going to want to use that. You have data from either NWEA or FastBridge or DIBELS or whatever assessment the school is using to show student growth. You also already have data from your grades. What is that showing you? You have behavior reports. You have data from attendance reports. Most of your schools have already done parent and student satisfaction surveys. What was that telling you? So you're going to want to look at that. You might have done some staff surveys. And then also think about data that you have from your teacher evaluations. And even just from your informal conversations that you've had with, people from the community or staff. All along the way this past year, you've already been collecting data. So you pretty much already have a lot of this. Now, as you think about it, think about your methods. And again, you already have methods. You've either done surveys, you've done evaluations, or you have done some academic assessment. So you already have most of this information. And so we're going to just pause right here because I want everybody to go ahead and just take a moment. I'm going to give everybody about 30 seconds to 1 minute to really think about this. So before you even start to look at the data, thinking about everything that you looked at for the year, what is your gut already telling you about the state of the school? So take about 30 seconds to 1 minute to either think about what you already know about your school, or even just write down what you already know about the state of your school. Okay. All right, so I hope you've already got some ideas about what are you already noticing about your school. One thing I forgot to mention at the start was if you have questions along the way, please go ahead and put them in the chat. We also will have some time at the end for some questions. Okay, so step 2 is a comprehensive needs assessment. So now that you've gathered all your data, this is where you get to start going through and asking questions. This is also a part that I love doing, but I kind of am a big data nerd. I just love looking at this because data tells the story of your school. It just lets you know these are the things that we're doing well, and these are the things that we're working on, and it just tells a very clear story. So when you're doing it, you want to take each piece of the data and you're going to organize it by academic, behavior, attendance, evaluations, and you're going to use it to just ask questions. And we're going to go through in a little bit about what types of questions might you ask. But really your goal during this time is you're trying to figure out what are our strengths? What are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's doing well? And then we're also going to look at what are our weaknesses? Where are the areas that we want to improve? You're also going to look for correlations. Are you finding that if there's a weakness in one area, there's also weakness in another area? Where might be some connections? And the biggest tip that we have, I would say, is avoid excuses. When I've worked with some schools, a lot of times what they do is they like to say, oh, well, they're low because we have a lot of new kids to our school. Or we're low because this happened. And they try to start giving excuses. So at this point, it's not a time to look at why, it's just a time to look at the facts. What is the data telling us? What is the story of our school? And just keep those other ideas out for right now. Sometimes it does help to hire outside consultants as we come in and we don't have those biased in there. So we're not, we're able to look at all your data with unbiases. So we ask a lot of questions when we're looking through the data. So the next few slides, what we're going to go through are just some of the questions that we look at. We actually ask a lot more questions. We go into a little bit more detail, but these are just some good questions to get you started. So when we look at the academic data, one of the first questions we ask ourselves is, where does the learning start to fall apart? Is there a specific skill or standard that's really separating our proficient students from our non-proficient students? We want to look and see what skills or standards are they not mastering? And are those skills and standards, is it isolated to a specific grade? Are we noticing that maybe grades K1 and 2 are struggling with one standard, but then maybe grades 3 through 8 are struggling with a different standard? Or are we noticing that if a student is struggling in a certain standard in grade 1, they continue to struggle with that same similar standard going on going on through every year? We also want to know which students are not learning. Okay, is it isolated to a specific demographic, a specific grade, a specific classroom? So we want to start looking to see which of our students are not learning. We also then look at our behavior data. And some of the questions that we want to know is, when are behaviors occurring? Is there a specific time in the day where we're always noticing more issues are happening? How about a place? Is there a specific place that they're always occurring, or more often occurring, I should say? We also want to look at, sometimes we get into this mind that the behavior is awful and it's driving us crazy. But then when we look at the percentage of students receiving office referrals, it might only be 3% of the population, which then you're like, oh, not so bad. So always look at your percentage of students to see, is it really a big issue or is it not? But then also, again, looking at, is there a specific group of students that receive more office referrals? Is it more males versus females? Is it a specific demographic group? Is it coming from a specific classroom, a specific grade? So those are just some questions we want to ask ourselves going through behavior. And again, these are only some of our questions. Evaluation data. Okay, so this is where you've looked at your teacher evaluations. You've been collecting them. Hopefully teachers have had 2 to 3 evaluations during the school year, plus some other walkthroughs and observations that you've done. As you're looking through it and you're looking at the data, thinking about some of those elements on your evaluation rubric. Overall, what is your staff doing well? Where are they just kind of the rock stars and hitting it out of the park? Then as you look at it, is there certain elements on the rubric that you're noticing? You know what? We're noticing across the board, our teachers are struggling with this one. And maybe if you're not even struggling, maybe you have some that are always showing that they're exceeding. But then you have this one area where really no teachers are exceeding. They're proficient, but they're not exceeding. What can we do to help with that? Another thing to ask yourself is, are teachers being able to solve their own problems that are happening in the classroom? And this talks about not only academic issues, like if they're noticing that their students are struggling in an area, are they able to come up with interventions and strategies to help solve that? But also, what about some of the behavior issues that are occurring in their classrooms? Are teachers solving those problems, or are they consistently, calling administration for help? Again, looking at that, is it all teachers and staff that are calling for administration, or is it just a few? And then kind of looking at, if it's just a few teachers, what's separating the teachers that are able to handle their own problems versus those that are not? That can also help us figure out what our next steps might be. And then also looking to see, our teachers using data to drive instruction. Many schools do have PLCs. It's looking at those PLCs. Are those PLCs effective? Are teachers using that time wisely to look at data? Are they looking at data accurately? Do they know how to analyze the data to really determine the best needs of their classroom and the best next steps? And then are they taking that time that they're using during those PLCs to say, students are really struggling at this, so this is going to be my action plan. Now I'm going to take this data and I'm going to use that data to drive my next steps. So are teachers really using that data to drive instruction? And is it making a difference? So in step 3, this is where we get to look at the why. Okay, so now we start to say, we've looked at all these things. We've identified the strengths and the weaknesses. We've asked all these additional questions to help us really understand the problem. Now we get to ask ourselves, why? Why are these things happening? So we really just start to put on our thinking caps. We work in our groups and we say, what's causing these challenges? We also try to determine additional causes that may be affecting this. We also want to use evidence to support our logic. So again, always going back to the data. If your data is not supporting your whys, it's good to kind of always go back to then go, do we have data to support this? If we don't, we take it out. Sometimes we might look at, say, reading instruction, and we might say, hey, maybe only 25% of our students are reading at proficiency. So we want to understand why. We recently worked at a school who kept insisting that the reason why their students were not reading at proficiency was because they didn't have strong phonemic awareness, and phonics. So we started looking at their data. And actually what we discovered after looking at data was the students actually had a really strong, understanding of phonics and phonemic awareness, but where their learning started to fall apart was during fluency. And so then we started saying, it wasn't what our original thought was, it's fluency. Why are they struggling with fluency? And so when we went back and started really looking at the programs, what we noticed was students had a very few opportunities to actually doing the reading. They spent a lot of time doing phonics activities and phonemic awareness activities. They spent a lot of time doing comprehension activities and vocabulary activities. But at those times, the teacher was generally reading to them. And then we started realizing there's no opportunities, or there's very little opportunity where students are actually doing the reading and even working on some fluency passages. So with that school, we worked on building it into their schedules, but we were able to support it with evidence. And again, we discovered something different than what they originally thought. We look to see also if there's other factors that might be interfering with the progress. Again, this might be something where we look at is if we're noticing not schools, but students aren't progressing in maybe math or reading. Was there something interfering with it? Was there high attendance issues that might be interfering with that? Were there behavior issues that were interfering with that? Was there a lack of classroom management or clarity? Was there maybe not enough interventions provided? So we start looking to see what might be some additional factors that could affect on that could be affecting that. Then as the group is there, we always know that when we're working with a group of people, we have differing ideas and we have differing opinions about why something would be there. So we want to make sure that we're agreeing on the root cause. We're listening to everybody's ideas, but when it comes down to it, we all agree on that root cause. So some tips for this when you're identifying root causes is be honest and be transparent. And again, after today, we can assist in this process. And then here we get to the fun part, like my favorite. I mean, let's be honest, analyzing data is also super fun and super cool, but this is where you get to put on like your creative brain. For those of you that love to just design and create, this is the super fun part where you get to say, all right, let's come up with our solutions. What are our strategies? What are our projects that we're going to do now that we know why we have these challenges? So we ask ourselves, what can we do to make the situation better? How can we really address that root cause and get to that desired state? So a lot of times if you just look at it and you say, here we are, we're right here, but we know we're going to be here. This is what we want to do. Okay. So go ahead and start thinking, how are we going to get from here to our desired state? So we're going to talk now about what are some things that some schools have used Title I funds for. So we've seen some schools implement additional interventions and or tutoring programs. And tutoring programs have occurred either before school or after school. We've seen schools offer professional development opportunities. We've seen schools adopt programs, curriculums, supplemental resources. Some of these have been like a book that comes with the teacher's guides. Others have been like technology programs. Some schools have funded workshops, or they've invited guest speakers to come in. Some schools have hired additional employees, such as additional interventionists, maybe paras, to come in and help and provide support. Some have purchased additional technology equipment, so that might include like projectors, smart boards, even some of those when you have to buy licenses for certain programs, additional computers, additional iPads, laptops, that type of thing. And some have used money to pay for family engagement activities. So these are just some suggestions and some ideas that schools have typically done. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so what we want you to do right now is to think about the projects that your school paid for with title funds for this past year. So go ahead and just jot it down. What are some of the projects that your school funded? Now, what I want you to do is quickly go ahead, take another minute and think about what's working, what's going well with those projects. Right now, I want you to come up with another category, maybe another column or just another space on your paper and write what you think is not working. Where are your challenges with your current projects? Okay, now I want you to go ahead and answer this one. What else can you do? What are some ideas that you have right now, just off the top of your head, that you might want to implement for next year? What might be missing or lacking from your program? And something that also think about as you're thinking about projects for next year is that you might use some of the same projects that you've used this year, and that's okay. You might say it's working great and you want to continue with it, or you might say you're starting to see some growth, but you notice some changes and it's okay to modify those projects as well too. Or you might say, nope, I want to do all new complete projects. So it's finding out what's working best for your school. But a tip for here is be creative. Let those juices just flow and come up with some ideas. And then also talk with other school leaders. They might have had some similar issues and came up with some ideas that you hadn't thought about yet. So go ahead and talk with other school leaders to see what are they doing and what have been their results. All right, so now Patty's going to talk about funding.
So before we move on, I did want to say that targeted, if you're a targeted school, I don't know if any of you are, you have less leeway on being creative. So just make sure you know which way it works. So knowing the title funds, if you're already accessing MEGS, you can find this already for 2025. And if you didn't work on it last year, you can access your 2024 also in MEGS at the same time. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So when you go to MEGS, basically this is a website that allows you to do all the different things that you need to do for federal funds. And this year, it's really important to make sure you do your central data collection, which is on the left-hand side there that you can see. And one thing that they really, really suggest strongly is making sure before you do that, that you go to MDE.org, which your Iowa will have to do, and fill out all the correct contacts, because then they'll move directly into the central data collection as well. So what we're talking about today is ESEA consolidated. So you'll see there are some drop down arrows. So right now, I'm sorry, I can't see it. Is it 25 there?
It is.
So it's right now on 25. So below you can see some blue lettering and it says view grant application. Now, if you haven't created your application yet, it will say create application, and then you'll be able to see it. So go ahead. I don't know if you're able, so I'm assuming you've clicked on that before, and we're going to go to the next slide. So there are different tabs that will drop down, and you can't see them on this slide, but at the top right in MEGS, you will see a drop down menu, because there will be different titles, and you will also have the ESEA consolidated. So this is part of the ESEA consolidated, and you'll do very little of this when you are doing your planning for this year. So here it tells you exactly how much money you have in each of your title programs. Obviously, if you don't have a high EL population, you won't get Title III. But you can create a consortium with other charter schools, and they strongly suggest that to try to get up. I think it's $10,000 that you need in that one. Also, you do have the capability of moving Title II and Title IV into Title I. So if you don't have a lot of money in those areas, you can move them into Title I, or just one of them into Title I if you would like to. And that's that one, unless you have questions.
So one of the things as you're getting ready to put projects into MEGS is really making sure that you're aligning the data, your comprehensive needs assessment, your root analysis, your projects, and your budget. So we recommend using a really simple organizer such as this to help make sure that you're aligning everything and you're able to see things work really quickly. So in this example, it has the title of a project. So your title of a project could be something as simple as improve math scores. So the current state is where you would think about your data. Okay, so what are you looking at? Maybe you're looking at MCA scores and you're saying, you know what, only 33% of our students were proficient in math this year. So that would be my current state. 33% of our students, showed proficiency in math. The tool that I used to evaluate this project was I was using MCA data. So I could just just write that in really quick. Well, what's my desired state? What do I want it to be? And here you can use a SMART goal if you want, but you do not have to use a SMART goal. So you may say something like 50% of our students will show proficiency in math, or you might just say the proficiency of our students in math will increase.
Sorry, Marcy, can I interrupt for just a second? Tony needs to step off in a few minutes, so she wants to know if she can share the slideshow with her.
Yes.
Okay,
I'll do that.
thank
Sorry
you.
to interrupt your
Bye,
flow there,
Tony.
Marcy. Thank you so much.
So, when you're thinking about your desired state, another thing that we always recommend is align it with your contractual goals, align it with your world's best workforce goals that you already have. We don't want you creating a whole nother set of goals. We want you to already align it with the goals that you're already working with. It'll just make things more manageable, and it'll help just unify the whole school as they're all working towards the same goals. So think about that when you're coming up with your desired state. Then this is where you get to put your activities. What are you going to do? So for example, going with my example of math, improving math proficiency, one activity that the school might do is they might implement an after-school math tutoring program. So that I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to list in here, after-school math tutoring program. Well, I need to think about all the things I'm going to need for that. Well, if I'm doing an after-school math tutoring program, I'm going to need tutors. So I need to make sure I'm saying that in my activity, I'm going to hire tutors. I'm probably going to be using some sort of a curriculum or resource, okay? Even if I already have the curriculum, I might have some costs associated with it because maybe I need to get some additional manipulatives to work for it. Maybe I need to purchase additional licenses if it's an online program, or I'm just even going to have printing costs associated with that too. So I want to make sure that I'm talking about my curriculum that I'm going to be using there. My after school activity, I'm also going to be providing snacks, and I'll have Patty talk about can snacks be funded for the after school program using Title I funds, because I'm not quite sure about that. And then I'm also going to have some training to go along with that because I'm going to want to train my tutors. So I'm going to have a little bit of PD in there as well. So I already know I have 4 activities in there, and I was really clear about my activities in there. So now I'm going to think about my budget code. Well, I know I said I'm going to hire tutors. That means I'm going to have salaries. So I'm going to put salaries in there. I'm going to put the budget code in. I said I have, I'm going to be using some curriculum. So I'm going to be putting in curriculum code. And then I also said I was going to have some PD in there because I need to train my tutors. So I'm going to put in a code for professional development. And then if snacks is an allowable expense, then I would put that in there too. So I made sure I listed those activities. And now I'm going to make sure I put those budget codes down here. Now, most likely when you're coming up with a project such as improving math, it's not just going to be one activity. So you know what, my next activities, I want to make sure I'm also going to do some school-wide professional development with staff. Okay, so I know during that activities that I want to do professional development that's maybe focused on making sure our teachers are understanding that they have to present a conceptual view of math. So I'm going to make sure I have some, I'm going to list that in there. Again, right now, I'm not sure if I'm going to hire someone, so I could put TBD, because I might hire an outside consultant to come in and do it, or I might hire a math interventionist to do it. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do of who I'm going to do that, but I know I'm going to do some type of PD. And I also know during that there's going to be some resources and materials that my staff is going to need. So I'm going to make sure I put both of those in there. For my budget code, I'm going to align those up now. Okay, I've said I'm going to use PD, so I could put in a PD code. I also said that I was going to be providing materials and resources to the staff during that PD. So I'm going to add that budget code in here as well. Maybe my last one that I'm going to do is we have enough funds to maybe hire a math interventionist, or maybe instead of a math interventionist, I'm going to use this money to hire an extra para. Either part-time or full-time. That's something that the school can look at too. And so during that, I'm going to say I'm going to hire a para here, and that para is going to provide additional support. So while the teacher is doing the main teaching, my para is going to be there to offer additional support and resources, maybe work one-on-one or in small groups with that student. So my budget code here, I'm hiring a person, so that would be salary. So I just kind of made sure everything was connected. And I also made sure that I'm kind of already thinking, will all these activities I do, starting a tutoring program, providing professional development, and hiring a para, will those 3 things help me get to my desired state of improved math? And I would say, yeah, I think that answers those questions. Those are some 3 activities that I might do. And then again, you're just gonna wanna check the budget codes that I'm listing, are all those codes actually, did I talk about them? Did I reference them in my activity? And does my current state also show that this is a need? And I think by saying, yeah, only 33% of my students were showing proficiency in math, that's showing a need. So step 5 is your action plan. And this is where you just want to kind of want to say, what are you going to do and when are you going to do it? So for example, if I'm going to start a tutoring program, I'm going to say in my calendar, when are we going to start this? When are we going to start this tutoring program? And how long will it last? So maybe I'm just going to do it for 6 weeks to start with. We're going to do it 2 days a week. We're going to have to start in October. This way we can use, data from September to start identifying students to begin in October. I also know then prior to that, in September, I'm going to have to start hiring my tutors as well as training them. So I'm already starting to plan a little bit backwards of when I'm going to do all these things. And then I also want to think about who is responsible. So who would be in charge of your Title I funds? Who's going to be responsible for doing these things? Who might be in charge of maybe some professional development and training? So think about all the things that you need to do to get each one of your activities started and who. And again, we can always assist with drafting and finalizing these plans. Step 6 then is when you want to think about monitoring, evaluating the plan. We also recommend, as you're putting into your calendar, when you're already doing dates, we recommend putting regular check-in dates. So already schedule it. Our recommendation is a minimum of 4 times a year. So quarterly, you're going to want to look at your projects and look at the data that shows support. And you might look at it and be like, we are on our way to reach that desired state. We're rock stars. Let's keep going. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Or you might look at it and say, wow, our students are actually getting worse. And if they're getting worse, we want to make sure we look to see why, and then we want to make adjustments to what we're already doing. So just kind of always making sure that throughout the year, you are having those continuous monitoring and looking at it to make sure things are working. Just remember, it's an ongoing process. This continues and we repeat. And then the last one is to communicate the plan. MDE did say that last year they went out to a few different schools and they talked to some of the staff there to find out, hey, what's your school improvement plan? What are you working on this year? And they were shocked when they found out a lot of the staff members had no clue about the school improvement plan. Schools were, the staff that were teaching the students didn't know that they were working on some goals. So the only way that your school improvement plan is going to be effective is if others know about it. So make sure that during your August workshop week that you kick off and you let them know, hey, these are our goals for this year. This is what we're going to be working on. These are our priorities. And then throughout the year, as you're evaluating it and monitoring it, provide those updates to the staff too. Let them all know, how is this school doing on meeting the goals?
Can I interrupt there too? They also suggest that all staff, so even your lunch ladies, even your bus drivers, even your custodians, because they sometimes see things that other staff don't see, and they need to be included in creating your plan and keeping abreast of what it is. So. Oh, and also there was a question about, usually you don't get the official data for your MCAs until June or July, but it's okay to use those scores that you get right after the students have tested. However, again, best practice is using multiple measures. So Marcy already mentioned MCAs, NWEAs, classroom data. Any of that can be used to help create this plan.
Thank you, Patty.
Oh, and back to your question, no, you cannot pay for food.
Thanks.
Unless you are a school-wide plan. If you're a school-wide plan, basically anything is good as long as you can go back to your comprehensive needs assessment and show why you're doing it.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Targeted, you can't.
Okay, so roadmap for getting it all into MEGS. Okay, so we know that MEGS is coming up soon. And so we do have a short time, but we can still get this all in. So May, that's where you are right now. So what should you be doing now? Right now, it's start sorting through the data and asking those questions. So it's looking at your comprehensive needs assessment and figuring out what are they doing well, what are they not, and what are those challenges. Early June, you want to start identifying the root causes. So that's when you start looking in and you're saying, so why are they having these challenges? And then this is where you get to start thinking about what are your possible solutions? What are your projects? What are your activities? What are your strategies that you might do? So kind of think about early June for that. Mid-June, this is where you want to finalize. Okay, so you've already done all your brainstorming. You've already come up with a lot of ideas. This is where you want to say, this is what we know we want to focus on for next year, determine those projects, and then you want to complete that school improvement plan. Remember, if you are a school-wide Title I program, you must complete the comprehensive needs assessment and you must complete the school improvement plan. So you'll already have that done, so complete that, and you've already done all the thinking, so now it's just kind of filling in the blanks, and again, we could help you with that. And then at the end of June, make sure that you have everything submitted into MEGS so that you can start accessing your funds. So the due date really is June 30th, but since June 30th is a Sunday, it's been extended to July 1. So by 3 p.m., all the projects do need to be submitted into MEGS.
And I'd strongly suggest not waiting till that last day because there's often errors that come up when you try to submit. And it would be really difficult to make sure you get a hold of someone at MDE if you can't solve those errors yourself. If you did it all in one day.
And then we also just want to remind you that both companies are here to support you. So IDI can support with developing your school improvement plan and draft over the next few weeks. And then also we can meet with you during the year to monitor and adjust the plan as needed. So that's one of the services that we provide. So that not only do we help you develop it, but we help you throughout the year to monitor and evaluate it and make adjustments. And over the next week, either myself or Rod, who is the founder and owner of IDI, will be reaching out to you over the next couple of weeks to see what are the ways that we can support you. And then Designs for Learning can help you. They can make sure that the application meets technical and budgetary guidelines, and they can also help facilitate the actual upload into MEGS. So we do want to know this, we would like to provide some additional support throughout the year, as well as we'd like to provide some additional trainings. So what we'd like to know from you is, and if you could type this into the chat, just what topics are you most interested in learning more about? And this could just be thinking about over like the next couple of weeks and in the next few months as we start preparing for the next school year. What are the topics that interest you the most? We just want to make sure that we're meeting your needs. Would it be conducting comprehensive needs analysis? Is it help identifying root cause? Is it understanding how to develop strategies and projects that address that root cause? Is it monitoring and evaluating the projects in the school improvement plan? Or is it something else? So if you could just take a minute and type in how we can best support you going forward into the chat, that would be really helpful. Thank you. And then Here's our email addresses. So like I said, we'll be reaching out to you, Roderick, or I will be reaching out within the next couple of weeks. And then here's our email addresses as well that you can reach out to us if you have any questions. So you could go ahead and take a screenshot of this as well if you want, just to so that you have it. And then we're ready for some questions and answers. So go ahead and you can either unmute yourself and speak out, or you could go ahead and type it into the chat.
Hi, I'm Molly Honold over at FIT. I'm here with Shannon Baker. We just had a quick question about what would be the difference between doing the targeted services and the full school? Is it more funding? Is it just a more complicated application? We're kind of looking for just a brief pro and con on it.
So the basic difference is school-wide is truly what it says. It isn't just certain students that are being addressed, it's your whole school. Targeted is you have certain students that you are giving those services to. When you're having meetings, you're only having meetings for those students. There isn't more money. The other big difference is a number of our schools had to switch to targeted because they didn't have the school improvement plan. So if you were moved to targeted and you want to go back to school-wide, you have to take a year to plan. First send in the paperwork saying you want to be school-wide and then do the plan. The school-wide gives you a lot more freedom to be creative. So for instance, basically pullouts, interventions, professional development, assessments, truancy, staffing, parent liaison, and materials is all you can use for targeted. If you are school-wide, if you say driver's ed is going to help our students, somehow it's going to, give them incentive to be better academically, you could use driver's ed as your idea. So it's really more that you want to be able to have more creativity in your projects, or honestly, your root causes are things that really don't fit into the targeted program. So it's kind of hard to know what schools should do.
That was super helpful. Thank you.
I just want to add on to that. Remember that in order to be a school-wide, you have to have a minimum of 40%.
You don't. There
you
are
don't?
two different categories, so you have to pick one or the other. You
Okay.
can get a waiver.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I would like to make a comment. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
We have been doing comprehensive needs assessment for many years, and the way I take it, it's a very complex and actually lengthy process. And we also big part of our population are English language learners, free and reduced. So when we do this assessment, we do all kinds of data, but MCA data is important for us as well. And we really dive into MCA data when the state sends it to us. So we don't just take the performance data after the test. We actually do with the pivot tables. We look at achievement levels. We compare the different subgroups. So, and this is a big part of our comprehensive needs assessment. So I'm a little bit nervous about how we actually used to do a lot of that MCA data processing, like in the end of June, early July. But now I feel like the whole thing is shifting, and for us having the whole everything completed by mid-June, I would say it's a challenging task, I would say, because there's just a lot of components to it.
And you do not have to include MCA data in your rationale. So you make the decision.
So we can just build it on NWA and our phase bridge early literacy, things like this. Is that
Correct.
okay?
It's up to you how you want to use the data. Not
Okay.
that you shouldn't use MCA, but you as a school can decide
Yeah.
what data you're using for your rationale.
Yeah, we
in
just
your
been
evaluation.
using all of it. And so because, you know, it's nice to have, because when we look at our school improvement plan, in the end of August, we do have a complete picture. So that's why it feels like we can be doing one plan and then adding more information and having a final, you know, like almost like doing one piece for this grant application and editing more to this and, you know, for the end of the summer for the school. So it just, I don't know, it just feels like a little bit of. And
Yeah,
I
and
know I know you're trying to help. We actually
Yeah.
worked with Rod last year and it's been great. I'm just a little bit.
So my suggestion is an
frustrated, I guess.
MDE is not trying to make things more difficult. If you truly know a snapshot of your school and you truly know what the root causes are, and it's based on data that you've been collecting all year, that's more important to them.
Yeah.
So Marcy's right. MDE doesn't want you to wait till the end of the year to make a decision on what's going on in your school.
But
You're-
still putting the document together, that comprehensive needs assessment, it's a big, you know,
It is,
It's a-
but you don't have to include the MCA in that at
okay.
this
No,
point. if you
I got it.
don't.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
Any other questions?
Hi, this is Sarah. I have a quick one. Forgive my ignorance. How do I know if I'm targeted or unrestricted?
Sarah, at this point, you don't have any Title I funds. So you would only be targeted or school-wide if you were getting Title I funds.
Okay, okay. Thank you. I
Mhm.
know I had emailed with you the other day, right?
Yes, and I'm
Oh,
double checking with MDE on your question. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I want to make sure I have it exactly right. So I'm waiting for them to respond to me and then I'll let you know.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we're kind
Mhm.
of going through like our business finance person she's finally making us let her go. And
Oh,
she's been with the school since the beginning. So for like 25 years.
Mhm.
So now we're transitioning over to the office manager that I have now. And it's just, you know, some of those things that you just kind of went with because Binky knew what she was doing are now like, oh, shoot, I should probably study up a little bit. So
Mhm.
yeah.
What's your free and reduced lunch percentage?
This year it was 73%.
Ooh,
I
so
know.
so I think I mean, we probably shouldn't talk in front of everybody.
Oh, yeah, whatever. I don't care.
Okay, it sounds like then you probably refused to accept the Title I funds last year.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm in MEGS right now and I'm trying to, so like Title
So I'm
1A.
actually gonna pause it just because that one I would say is really just between the school and.
That's what I thought,
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
So
sure.
so I think you and Patty could connect offline. I think that'll just be better for the two of you.
Sure.
And then you could
Sure.
go dive in deeper and solve those
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, well, you do have our email addresses. So Patty and myself and Rod's address have been included on all the emails that we've been sending to you. So if you didn't get it from the PowerPoint, then go ahead and look back at one of those emails. And like I said, Rod or I will be reaching out to you within the next few weeks. Thank you all for your time. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a great rest of the school year. And happy school improvement planning.
Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sarah, if you're still on and everybody else goes, do you want to just talk for a little bit? Oh, did she leave?
Yeah, I think I only see two others.
Okay. I'll just email her and thank you.
All right, thank you, Patty. Have a great rest of your day.
Yep, you too. Bye.